My dad made me pick a fallback career when I was going off to college, so I told him I wanted to be a televangelist. Very popular at the time.
Praise be.
Good evening, everybody. I am so excited to welcome Ty Streetman back. He was here almost exactly 2 years ago, and we were hoping that this time would be a book signing, but his book is still on the way.
Yeah, it's on the way.
Still on the way. You can pre-order on Amazon for November. Early Christmas presents for yourselves. So you can get on Amazon right now. It's called Aquatic Habitats. And it's phenomenal. I've seen a lot of the pictures and some excerpts of these beautifully aquascaped, practical, doable biotopes. So a lot of times you see biotopes out there that are almost impossible to recreate because they want some specific tree leaf or some specific stone from across the world that you just can't get, or plants that aren't attainable in the hobby. So Ty has done all that for dozens of biotopes with practical things that you can actually get. And they're also, I love biotopes, but a lot of biotopes ain't pretty. But he made, Melanie. He makes them absolutely gorgeous. So he's just gotten back from Brazil, where a few years back he did his master's, and he spent some time hunting down Ember Tetras. And he is also today with Micah's assistants and our friends at Art of Aquaria, and who brought in the botanicals? We brought in the botanicals. Micah did?
Well, I got them at Art of Aquaria.
Ah, from Art of Aquaria. So they've created this beautiful tank. And one of you, hopefully me, but probably one of you statistically, will be able to go home with us tonight. So make sure you get your raffle tickets at some point from the gentleman who's trying on clothes behind me.
We're selling these back.
This is YouTube Live, man.
Woo! Yeah!
You go YouTube Live. You can actually see him. Yeah, he's changing clothes behind me on YouTube Live in front of an audience of thousands. You can buy your tickets from the person inappropriately trying on clothes behind me. But I did tell you guys earlier without the microphone, I'll say it again, we were adding this all up. The tank, the very fancy UNS tank, the very fancy light from Twin Star, the absolutely gorgeous wood, and then the creme de la creme, Oase, as you guys know, donated some of these really nice canister filters with the heater inside, so thank you to Oase. But so you could walk home with all that for the low price, possibly the chance of $5 a ticket or 5 for 20. So, you know, bust out those 20s. You do take $100 bills, right? PayPal. I did it by PayPal because I'm out of cash. Mike Helwig took all the rest of my cash for worms. Or credit card. We do that, Ian? What? Credit card. So you guys can max out your credit cards. Did you know if you call, they'll raise your limit? Anyway, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Ty Streetman.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm using this one as well? No?
Why did I hand you that?
I don't know. Can you hear me? No? Microphones?
Did you turn it on?
That might help. How about now? No? This one?
You can hear it now.
You can hear me?
There are other ones or not.
You can hear me in the room?
I'm responsible for that.
Okay. I won't shout too loud.
It's working. I can
Okay.
hear it.
So thank you very much for that introduction, Steve, and thank you everyone for bringing me back here. I must have done something right that, you know, I'm here 2 years later, and I had such fun last time, and I'm really honored, and I feel very privileged to be back here with you guys, and I'm looked after by all the wonderful people from Maasai, and yeah, it's a real luxury, and I'm enjoying it. So I hope that you enjoy today with what I'm going to share with you. We are going to talk about Ember Tetras. There's maybe a clue here, and we'll see how it all goes with the tech. I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes because we set the tank up before the talk, so we could talk more relaxed, and I'm not rushing through stuff because that's not fun for anyone. But if anyone gets bored, just yell, and I'll speed it up, you know. You guys are straight talking out here. It's not all, excuse me, please, and thank you. So, hang on, let's go. So I was in Brazil in January and February, in central Brazil, and my microphone, every time I turn away, it goes quiet, right? Okay. And I was in the state.
The other one, which you could hold in your fingers if you want.
Ah. How about that? Is that better? Okay. Figured it out. You know, I'm from the old world. We haven't mastered all this stuff yet, so give us a break. So central Brazil, I was in the state of Goiás and Tocantins. There we go. And this is where we have the Araguaia River Basin watershed. So we're going to go and have a look at this. And it's this, hang on, where's my pointer? Here you can see this watershed. It's actually two rivers, the Tocantins and the Araguaia. So the Araguaia Basin, you can see here's the Tocantins River and the Araguaia River, and they drain quite a large area, and they flow north, and it comes out just south of the mouth of the Amazon River. They flow through 4 states, Goiás, Mato Grosso, Tocantins, and Pará, and it's part of what's known as the Cerrado biome. So this is kind of dry forest and savannas, but it's in the trans-Amazonian region, so it's where the southern belly of the Amazon rainforest blends into the Cerrado grasslands. I'm going to fiddle with the mic a bit better because...
You want to try this one, Sid? You can just take that one off.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's just directional, so you have to speak straight into it.
Should I turn this one off?
Yep.
Sorry, folks.
I'll take it. No, wait.
Unplug me. How about that? All right. So, where does the Araguaia sit within the context of Brazil? Sorry. So here's the Amazon basin, and we can see we've got the main Amazon River here. We've got rivers like the Madeira, Maranhão, Xingu, which I'm sure many of you guys have heard of. And then here we have the Araguaia. You can see the basin here, and the Tocantins, and these flow north. Here's the mouth of the Amazon, and here is where the Tocantins and the Araguaia come together in a confluence and flow out into the sea. Like I said, it fits into this trans-Amazonian region, so where the Amazon starts to blend into the Cerrado in the central highlands of Brazil, and this area is disappearing environmentally faster than the Amazon rainforest. The Cerrado biome is these great big grasslands, scrub forest. It's largely being turned into cattle ranching and soy plantations. And there's also the issue of hydroelectric projects along the waterways. So every one of these white dots here is a planned dam on the different rivers. And of course, these dams are barriers to migrating fishes, including many of our big famous catfishes from these regions. Deforestation in the last 40 years has been a really big problem. And big firms like Brazilian firm JBS, you guys may have heard about these guys in the media, they're a big provider of beef. They have lots of land that's been cleared. You can see all this yellow area. This is all deforestation within the Amazon. And there's lots of mining, there's lots of petroleum. So you can see this whole area is under serious environmental threat. What happens is development comes along the main rivers. They bring up heavy tractors and diggers up the rivers. Then they can start to deforest, and then you get these little feeder roads off the rivers, and you get development, these sort of veins trickling into the forest. The area where I was carrying out my research was near the town of Aruana, and this sits on the Araguaia Basin, on the Araguaia River, which is the division between the state of Mato Grosso and the state of Goiás. And Aruana, kind of like St. Louis, used to be a frontier town. It was the last stop before you crossed the river into Mato Grosso, which means dense woods. So you had these early European explorers who would go off across the river into the forest. Lots of threats, lots of disease, lots of very angry indigenous tribes, angry for good reason because the Europeans kept turning up and trying to kill and enslave them. Aruana these days is very popular as a sports fishing destination. And actually all artisanal fishing, so fishing for sustenance in the Araguaia River, is prohibited. Everything is catch and release. So you just have this huge sports fishing industry, and it supports the town. But around the town, you've got all this farmland, soy plantations, cattle ranches. There used to be a big ornamental fish trade collection in this area, but it's now been superseded by the sports fishing industry. So I talked a little bit about some of the environmental impacts. See, one of the things with cattle is they come down to the water to drink. And before we had these riparian habitats, right, with lots of aquatic plants along the margins, maybe roots, tangles of roots. really important habitat for fishes, but the cattle come down, they trample everything, and it becomes uniform, becomes mud and grass, and it makes the water really turbid. So this is a big problem for many different species. You can see sometimes you've got more dense cattle ranches, lots of CO2 production here. Also, lots of extraction of water. These are floating pumps all along the Araguaia River. You have these big pumps drawing water out for the nearby farms. And these pumps have got no filter over the intakes, so any fish under 30 centimeters is going in that. So you can imagine all these floating blenders all along the river, constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years, pulling water out. So it's a big problem. It's all a bit doom and gloom at the moment. I hope to cheer you up. I will try and keep it happier. What I thought I'd do is, I was there in the wet season, so I'm going to talk about wet season habitats, and I thought I'd break it up into 3 parts for you guys. We've got the flooded waterways. This is streams, creeks, rivers, flooded lagoons that submerge the surrounding areas. Temporary pools, so these are pools that are ephemeral. They disappear in the dry season. They might be a flooded depression or a dip in the ground, or they might be an area that becomes several pools linked together by the floodwaters. And then we're going to look at flooded meadows. So these are the grasslands that get completely inundated by floodwater from the river and rainwater. And you can see here this was in about 2 meters of water. You see the trees survive for many weeks and months happily submerged, and some serious rain clouds there. So we'll start with the Araguaia River itself. This is a pretty big river. It's home to over 800 species of fish. I normally work in the Pantanal wetlands where there's 330, so comparatively much poorer than the Araguaia. It drains a watershed, well, I read it as the size of Germany, so I thought I'd better make it applicable for you guys. So it equates to about the size of Montana, and it runs for over 1,400 miles. The wet season of the year that I was there was the heaviest they'd had apparently for 20 years. So you can see the river is completely turbid and brown. In the dry season, this huge river is barely more than 1 meter deep. You can walk across it, and it's much clearer. So here we can see you have this ancillary forest. This is the forest that follows along the river. And I wanted to explore an area much further north, near the Ilha de Bananal, which is the largest riverine island in the world, because I knew that that's where they had Ember Tetras. However, that territory is mostly administered by indigenous tribes. You have to negotiate with every community, and it's quite difficult to move through, especially in the wet season. But my professor who I was with said, I've got collection data near the town of Arowana, 500 miles south in the state of Goiás, so let's go there. So after the ichthyological conference that I was attending there, we got in the car and drove to go and find Ember Tetras. As you can see, the river was very murky. I'd really hoped to do a lot more snorkeling. See, visibility might be a little tricky. We had the flooded forest, which I was hoping to get into the water. Even if I just wanted to go swimming, I wouldn't here, because we do have black caiman, and they like to grow to 5 meters and sometimes predate on people, and they like murky conditions. In this area, because it's trans-Amazonian, you get lots of species from the Amazon region that occur here. So we have the river dolphins, the botos, you've got arapaima, you've got arowana. We did find some shallow, clear areas, which we're going to have a look at. But even in these areas, the fish were very widely dispersed because the floodwaters cover a very large area. So I've got a video here, and I think I have to play it here. But this is I don't have any sound.
Off the main river channel. And
Do I have a microphone there?
the fishes that we've seen here, we've seen some juvenile cupid cichlids,
Is that right?
some fish which are called matrinchá, or qual é o nome científico, Fernando?
So basically,
Matrinchá,
annoyingly quiet.
Brachum falcatus. It's an important forest
is
engineer. Eats lots of seeds and fruits and then
Shallow
disperses
water
them.
habitat.
But the thing that's caught my attention,
Thank
and
you.
try not to fall over,
You guys hear that?
clamber over Fabricio, is we have Carajal here. He's feeding a bunch of penguin tetras.
So we're using biscuits to feed the penguin tetras. This is a tried and tested scientific method
Done some underwater
of studying
footage,
fish.
but
Bring them in with some
a
cookies.
whole bunch of penguin tetras here. See the leaf litter? And they're coming up from about 10 to 30 centimeters depth. So yeah, there were some juvenile cupid cichlids here. There's a couple of other little tetras. But so cool to see.
Anyway, sorry, could you guys hear that more or less? Is that tricky? Yeah, okay. So you can see here there's loads of leaf litter in this flooded margins. This is an area of dry forest. I'm gonna need the microphone quite a bit, Steve, if that's all right. I've got various videos. So, dry forest. It'd been recently flooded, so there weren't a lot of fishes in this area yet. It was mostly penguin tetras, Thyrea bulki, and juvenile cupid cichlids, Biotodoma cupido. So the species diversity and abundance was pretty low, partly again because it's such a large area is flooded, all these animals are dispersed over the landscape. Usually we would expect to find many more fishes in this kind of habitat, but because of the extensive rains, they're dispersed across the landscape. There's also perhaps not that much food in these newly flooded habitats yet. All the insects have sort of moved out. There's also people, there was a household near here, so there's people, there's canoes, this can spook some of the animals. And I'm a bit spoiled by the pantanal, where we don't have the same species diversity, but we have abundance. What you have tons of it. So when I go to other habitats, I'm like, oh, there's not 4 million tetras in front of me. What's going on? My friends are like, it's not always like that. But I thought this is pretty cool penguin tetra biotype, quite easy to recreate, just leaf litter and some twigs. And yeah, they really love those biscuits. So I was just hanging outside of a canoe with a camera under the surface, and they came up and were enjoying them. And these fish are generalists, they're opportunists. That's why these small tetras end up in these habitats first, because they can eat anything, they can go anywhere, and they will take advantage of any resource they can find. The other species we encountered here was the green lizard tetra. You guys may know this one, Iguanodectes spirulus. These really beautiful, long tetras, kind of like aquatic, well, fish torpedoes, let's say. And they're very fast, they like to jump, they're quite sensitive. You put them in an aquarium, you need a lid. We also found some earth eaters, Satanoperca papaterra, which I'm going to show you. These are really cool cichlids, and they love, you can see them down here, they love this tangled network of submerged roots, palm fronds. You can see really complex habitat, and they can go in there, they can get away from me because I look like a big scary predator. There's giant river otters in this area as well, and fish are pretty scared of them, and I look like a giant river otter. So they're avoiding me in there. So this habitat was a mixture of kind of open sand, recently flooded grasses, palm fronds, branches, submerged trees, and some leaf litter. There weren't really any fully aquatic plants. I did see a tetra belonging to the Brychonops family. These are big insectivorous tetras. They have huge eyes. They like to jump up to 2/3 of a meter out of the water to catch insects. So the 3 tetra species here that dominated, the penguin tetras, the Brychonops, and the Iguanodectes, these are all insectivorous. So they come and they take advantage of the large area of open surface to hunt for insects along the top. You can see there's plenty of botanicals in here, palm fronds. I forget what the name of these, but you see them in the aquarium trade. Maybe you know, Melanie, what they're. You know what they are. Okay. Submerged grasses. There was a plant here which kind of looked like a kind of Madania, but I couldn't identify it just by looking at it. So we went to an area where there was supposedly really shallow, clear water. Because of the floods, instead of being 1/2 meter deep, the really shallow, clear water was 5 meters deep, and this is the top of the trees that we were supposed to be walking under. But we did find some shallow areas, so these are Hemiodus, big characins along the bottom, and then we've got more of the Iguanodectes up top. This aquatic plant is Syngonanthus, so you do find this from time to time in the aquarium trade. This was in the lagoon where I was supposed to be able to snorkel in 1/2 meter and admire all the fish moving through the plants, but the floodwaters had lifted all the stem plants up and out of the substrate, so they were just floating on the top. Like I said, this is the top of a tree, and here's the aquatic plants wrapped around it. So it wasn't really great for snorkeling in, but it was quite interesting to see. And one of the problems is you travel 9,000 miles to photograph something. Nature has other ideas. The weather doesn't play ball. Not much you can do. But we set out on this particular day. It's really sunny, very easy to get sunburned. I'm British, so I have to wrap up like Lawrence of Arabia and try and not look like a tomato. So the weather started really nicely, but it can change pretty quickly in the wet season. And as we were heading back to town, the storm front came in. Our pilot said, we really need to get back very quickly, partly because we're a lightning magnet on the river, which is always nice to hear. And my professor, who I love dearly, can't swim. He's an ichthyologist, he can't swim. And I was calculating, if we go in on this flat-bottomed boat, do I save the professor, the pilot, or the other professor who I don't know that well, so probably not, or me in the camera gear? I've got a little video here. So after 10 minutes of rain, we're trying to get to the hotel.
And this is the road.
Trying to cross the road back to the hotel.
Yeah.
And
Right,
yeah.
back to the hotel, have a hot shower, and
So they don't have street sweepers in the wet season. You
long day.
just get the rain to do it. Next bit, temporary pools. So these are actually the coolest habitats to explore because they normally stay fairly clear, good visibility. They're filled with rainwater. They are sort of static habitats. Because of the clear conditions and penetrating sunlight, you get lots of aquatic plants, lots of macrophytes. So it's easier to make observations in there. And this is a temporary pool that was in a private property. So we went to a tackle shop in the town. We started talking to the owners. Where can we find Ember tetras? We've got some location data, but do you guys have any suggestions? And it turned out they used to collect ornamental fishes. So they said, yeah, you just drive out of town, past the airstrip, and there's a private property, knock on the door. They might let you in. You might find them there. So we turned up, the owner wasn't there, but the caretaker was there, and she was happy to let us in. And this is a seasonal pool, so in the dry season, this is a dust bowl. There's nothing there. But in the wet season,
Ty,
yes.
how do the stabilities last? I mean, I guess it must flood every season.
Yeah, everything disappears in the dry season. The seeds go into the substrate. The plant.
Like a ton of sedoides in that lab.
Yeah, well, you'll see sedoides mocking us because they die in the aquarium. Here they live growing on concrete.
look at all the sedoides. It's a plant very difficult to maintain in the aquarium. It likes acid water, loads of sun. Yeah, beautiful.
So I've got a bunch of video clips in this presentation. I hope that's okay, but I just thought it's an easy way to demonstrate to you.
That's the plant that's commonly sold at pawn stores, this mosaic plant.
Yeah, it loves to die, but in nature it grows. So little Ember tetras. And you guys probably know the gold tetras, right? So that's one species, but many species are infected by this parasite that does that.
Oh look, here's a tetra which has been parasitized by the parasite which augments the guanine in the scales, thus making it more visible, thus making it predated, eat more easily, so a heron or a kingfisher or a bigger predator will eat it, and then the parasite completes its life cycle in the guts of the bigger predator. Isn't nature amazing?
So if that happens to the fish, it sucks, because if I can see it, a kingfisher can see it, and it makes it easy to be snapped up, and the parasite has great fun in the digestive tracts of bigger predators. The main plant that we found here was this lovely Icornia diversifolia, really rich green textures, and it grows pretty fast. You can put it in your aquarium, it will take over. It is available in the hobby from time to time. But this was in the pool, and you can notice there's quite a few species in here, and you see how they hang near the vegetation at the margins. And there's some penguin tetras. See how fat those penguin tetras are? It's interesting that most of these little fish will only live perhaps one season. When the dry season comes around, they perish. But the size of these penguin tetras suggests that as the waters retreat from this habitat, they manage to follow them out, perhaps back to the main river, like we saw in the earlier habitat. They were in the main river, and that means they can feed up and last all year. And there were Ember tetras, and they were beautiful, as you can see. And the water is flowing out of a culvert, out of concrete piping under the road, draining a swamp on the other side of the road into this pool. And this is where the fish were hanging out, because all this food and nutrients are coming through there. And yeah, it's not exactly an exotic biotope, but it's a levee, basically, with drainage. Because of the clear water, this is just me showing off, obviously, with the Ember tetras. Because of the clear water, really easy to get in and make those observations. The caretaker told us none of the tourists who rent the property during the fishing season get in the water because they're terrified of snakes and a caiman that sometimes hangs out there. We didn't see anything. She also told us that in the dry season, all the fish and plants disappear. It's like a play sand pit. There's nothing there. So these temporary pools filled with rainwater and filled by the nearby swamps. This water had drained under the road into this pool, so it creates this current, this flow. It's bringing all these nutrients for the plant, bringing all these food items for the fish. And it's a dynamic that's very common across tropical habitats. You know, this flood pulse system, you have a dried out drainage ditch or depression, the rains come, suddenly there's this burst of life, all these plants emerge that have come up from seeds. The rains allow different waterways to connect, fish move into that habitat. Then when the rains drain down, either the fish move out quickly or they perish in the drought. I don't know if you guys will be able to see, but there's a pike cichlid hiding in this stand of plants, and he was using the plants to wriggle up to get closer to the small tetras and lying in ambush, which is kind of cool. So go briefly through some of the plants here. Ludwigia inclinata. This is a plant that's available in the hobby. It can be quite challenging. Really, really beautiful. I have it growing at home. Got a little video here for you guys.
So look at this matrix of plants. You've got the pseudoides, you've got the Icornia. You've got what, to my eyes, looks like Ludwigia inclinata. But when it's in its immersed form, I thought it might be Rotala.
It's Brazil, so there's a dog barking at all times.
Ludwigia. Got the grasses.
All right. So, and lovely Ludwigia pseudoides. From underneath, you've got these beautiful red colors. It's this lovely sort of mosaic, as Steve pointed out. It's quite demanding. And again, it's one of these plants that rises and falls with the water levels. As the water drops, it drains down. As the water disappears, the seeds are deposited in the silt. The decaying plant matter provides the nutrients for its own seeds, so that when the rains return, they can burst forth again. They grow up on these long stems, reaching for the light. On the other side of the road, they were growing at the entrance to the culvert, sort of rooted into concrete, which is not the usual substrate. But they're quite happy, loads of flow, covered in detritus, loving life. You try and give them, you know, an expensive ADA light, finest substrate, fertilizer regime, and CO2 in the aquarium, they just melt. So nature always does it better. Another really cool plant there was Cobomba facata. You guys probably know this one. It's often quite pink or purple in this habitat, and in some other places it's more of this sort of soft orange color. Really nice, really fluffy textures. And you know it's facata because of the little purple flowers. Can be challenging to grow in the aquarium, needs acidic water, CO2, good lighting, and even then it might just one day decide, nope, gonna melt, but it looks nice while it lasts. So you can see some of it here. These are some Poptella characins. You see how it grows in and amongst the Icornia diversifolia, everything covered in detritus, and yet still thriving because there's tropical sunlight and there's loads of nutrients. So the plants were pretty interesting, but of course the stars of the show were the Ember tetras. And generally these were very small specimens, so they were probably growing up in that season, born earlier in the year, will likely only live for a year or so, very intensely colored. They've got this constant diet of detritus, small aquatic invertebrates, insects, seeds, anything they can find. And we found them in groups of a dozen up to several hundred. And they were doing sort of laps around the pool. So they'd swim up against the current along one side, cross it very quickly, come back down the other side, cross it again. And part of this might be just a good way of searching for food. Another thing is avoid predation. Don't stay in the same place for too long, because there's plenty of predators around who would snap you up. And they drift pick. So they zip out of the shoal to snap at something in the current, and then come back in again. Other species here included our lovely penguin tetras. We also had the red-eye tetra, Barrio sanctifilamina, which used to be a Moncausea. I think I told you guys maybe last time in Brazil it's called la Tetra chapada, meaning the stoned tetra because of the red eye, and they're quite attractive. You also got the head and tail light tetras, Holopristis acellifer, used to be hemigramus. And we had the Iguanodectes, we had other members of Moncausea, Phenacogaster, Sahepinas, Poptella, and most of these small fishes hang out near the plants. On the other side of the road, in the swampy area, the diversity of species was much lower, mostly dominated by this Astyanax, this big guy is Astyanax goyanensis. Again, these are generalists and opportunists, and they were hanging out amongst the algae-covered Cobomba. Why is the algae so prominent in this part? Well, partly not so many overhanging trees, so lots more sunlight penetration, but also there's lots of farms nearby, so you've got agrotoxins, fertilizers, pollutants pouring into the water, lots of phosphates, so you get these algal blooms when you combine it with tropical sunlight. There was a species of Nymphea in here, but it was dominated by Kabomba, and we didn't find any Ember tetras or penguin tetras on this side of the road, but we did find some abandoned, discarded nets for collecting species. So it may have been that they were getting disturbed so often that they decided to move through the tunnels under the road to the private property where no one was harassing them. So yeah, you can see lots and lots of algae growing on the Kabomba, and that made it quite difficult to move through the habitat because it's filamentous, it's very fine. As soon as you move your hand or foot, it all breaks apart, covers your mask, covers the camera lens, gets in your ear and your nose. It's not too pleasant. And then it smells really bad when you come out of the water. So I was quite popular in the car because it was 30 degrees and 30 degrees centigrade. Translate that for us.
It's like 90.
Okay.
Hot.
It's hot and humid. So these are the Nymphea. I couldn't identify them, but they have these beautiful arrowhead leaves, really lovely red undersides, and the stems, they act as these breaks in the line of sight, which allows small fish to get out of view of predators. But they also acted as traps for the algae, so the algae would catch on them, and it formed these weird walls of algae that you had to move between. And the tops of the lilies, nice colors, sort of reds to greens, spattered. I'm not sure what the species was, but it was rather lovely. You've got these palm trees here, carandá. They can grow year-round with their feet wet. You always find them in swampy ground. So that was the only kind of tree around that habitat. The other plant that we have found here is Pontidaria crassipes, highly invasive, fast-growing plant. So it reaches up the surface. You've probably seen it growing like this, and then underwater, it looks like this. It grows up to the surface. You get the immersed plant, and then often the stem breaks. The floating element drifts away. When the water's levels drop, the floating element roots into the substrate. The whole process starts again. The submerged grasses and sedges along the margins, these are really important because they're complex habitats, so fishes can hide in them, get away from predators, also attack small prey items like insects, find seeds, and certainly the penguin tetras were moving through this habitat. We also found some invasive guppies, unfortunately, but they are absolutely everywhere. And yeah, the Ember tetra is just hanging out at the mouth of the culvert. You can see those colors. The sun came through the rain clouds, and they just look beautiful. You can see a pike cichlid here pretending he's not there, trying to get close to ambush them. And yeah, this is just me sort of showing off, selfie with the Ember tetras. There were also some small midwater darter characins, Characidium, that were swimming amongst them, but every time I tried to get close to film them, they zipped away. So this habitat, less than 40 years ago, would have been under a dense forest canopy. This house wouldn't have existed. The landscape around would be completely different. It would have been shaded by these big rainforest trees. The habitat's been transformed by people. Now there's roads, there's drainage ditches, there's culverts. But these small fish have still found a way to survive within that habitat. But we can also just think, how rich must this habitat have been before it was transformed by people? And just to give you a sense of that, so where we were, this is Arawana. Here's the airstrip. They grandly call it the airport. It's just a dirt strip. And then you have the road out of town, and here is that swamp area with the culvert under the road. So everywhere you see green is where you have a river, and because the rivers flood, the farms can't encroach upon them. I think I can show you on this video. So this is the local area, and then we zoom out. You can see here's the Araguaia River. There's quite a lot of forest along there. But you can see how this landscape should all look as dark as this, but it's been transformed. Here's the watershed of the river. This is all swamp. To the west, there's these highlands along here, but this area should be the same dark green as this area. So you can see the fragmentation of the Amazon forest and the Cerrado forests. So all of this should be the same color as this, but this has all been removed. So the rate of deforestation is really, really fast, and it's starting to fragment deeper and deeper into the Amazon. We didn't have any equipment to measure water parameters, unfortunately, That was with another team, the temperature felt, I've translated this, about 80 Fahrenheit, and judging by the presence of the Ludwigias and the Kabombas, the water was probably quite soft and acidic. There was quite a bit of suspended sediment in the current, and the substrate was made of fine sediment, sand, sort of clay, and leaf litter. Last part, flooded meadows. This is a really good place to get bitten by snakes, but it's also quite cool to explore. So once the river floods, the surrounding landscape also gets inundated. A lot of this would have been forest. It's now cattle pasture, but becomes water meadows. And previously, amongst the forest, you would have had open areas, open little bits of grassland. These would have flooded. So you would have found fishes such as killifishes naturally occurring here. We found mostly, again, the Astyanax, these guys dominating. This is me splashing around, trying to find stuff. These habitats can be very fertile, very productive when they are sort of natural and long established. But because these are sort of recently transformed from forest to meadow, there's not a lot of animals in them yet. However, the grasses and the plants and the shrubs that are growing there, they can survive many weeks being partially submerged. And during the dry season, this is all just cattle pasture. We did find some killifish. These are probably Melanohiblus caraja. They're quite cool little fish. We found lots of juvenile wolffish, Hoplioerythrinus unitenatus. These guys can crawl out of a pool, breathe atmospheric air, waddle across the land until they find another bigger pool, and then drop into it. So they can sort of, like prehistoric fish, come out and walk across the land. There are also lots of cool little freshwater crabs. These are really important prey items for lots of birds, as well as other mammals and fishes. And we found water scorpions, which have a horrendous bite, and I avoided them like the plague. We tried to move out of town along this dirt road that runs for about 80 miles. However, as you can see, it was pretty muddy, and even navigating in a proper 4x4 and everything, quite difficult. Unfortunately, because of the heavy rains, a lot of the meadows on each side of the road were too heavily flooded for me to get into. They were too deep, too turbid, or again, the fishes had been dispersed, so there wasn't actually that much to see. We did come across a few clear water habitats, which we're going to have a look at. And again, these are dominated by small characins, small tetras, the wolffish predating on them. And in these places, you do find some nice aquatic plants. So I've got a video here.
Spotted what we think maybe a Laetocara in this habitat.
So we saw Laetocara araguaia here.
Eleucharis, there's the lilies, there's some sort of isoetes type looking thing. And in and amongst that, in about 5 to 10 centimeters of water, there is Eleuchara. Now I think these aren't Nymphea, I think this is a kind of Sagittaria, because I don't know if you guys can see, but if you look at the base of the plant, it's got leaves that look a bit like a Halanthium bolivianum, or a Sagittaria, underwater. That's why I think this is Sagittaria rather than Nymphea. But I may be wrong, I'm happy to be proved wrong.
So this meadow had probably been flooded about a week ago, and the Sagittaria was in there waiting for the rain, exploded forth, and then you have all these lovely little lily pads. So along the edges of lots of the cattle ranches, you've got these little drainage ditches. These can fill and empty within a few days. Water from the river flows into them. There doesn't rain for a couple of days, so the waters recede. You have fish moving through them. We found some plants, Eleucharis, hairgrass, growing in there. But not a lot going on in these places because they are so ephemeral. They can be there one day and gone the next. However, in some places, did find quite a few fish. So this was at the edge of a meadow, and the rains had triggered the tetras into this spawning mode where they swim upstream against the current. And like salmon, they're swimming up to the area where they themselves spawned. And so they were trying to swim through a drainage pipe from here, and they were being attacked the whole time by young golden wolffish. I've got a little video here. I think I can show you. Here we go. And my Professor Fernando was catching fish by hand, but it's quite easy when they jump out the water.
Pull, look. Pega, 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 pega. Oh, pega. Pegou.
São estimulados pela corrente.
Look at that.
Nice and fat from eating
jumped
tetras.
into Fernando's hands.
So I'll show you this one. They're trying to swim up through this pipe.
Actually, the wolffish are chasing the smaller tetras over there. So you can see the larger wolffish. I move my head to the shadows. Oh, see, it's just jumped out. So there are some predatory attacks going on.
So we can see how even in a completely transformed landscape, this would have been rainforest 40 years ago, and this creek would have been covered by trees. The fish are still following the natural behavior, but now there's these barriers, right? There's these drainage pipes, it's harder to move upstream, but they're still trying to do what they always did, and we are just putting things in the way of that. So we drove a bit further up the road, and I was really disappointed because we hadn't found any Ember Tetras, and I wanted to find some. And then there was a meadow that looked like maybe there would be some Ember Tetras in there, so I went back to the truck to get my snorkeling gear, and I happened to glance down at this puddle next to the truck on the road.
Can you believe in this puddle by the side of the highway? It's full of fish, including Ember Tetras.
So they were just there. I've got another video to show you a bit more.
So the road must have been flooded, then it's drained out, and these little Ember Tetras have got trapped. Look at him. Tell me there's not an Ember Tetra. In fact, I might be able to get him with my hands. I don't want to hurt him, you see. Very sensitive. Little individuals. Come here. Oh, you bugger. One Ember Tetra, wild. Caught in a tiny puddle on the side of the road.
How's that for a nanobiotope, right? So
Falo que que achou?
we also found pike cichlids.
Preso. That is amazing. A pike cichlid, also trapped after the waters flooded the road and retreated, and he's still alive. Oh, wow, beautiful. Look at that.
So I did rescue him. I went and hurled him back into the meadow on the other side, which was flooded. But yeah, they washed out of the meadow over the road, and within maybe minutes, the rains have stopped, the water recedes, they get cut off, and then they're trapped there. And there were loads of egrets and herons stalking along the road, and we're like, what are they doing? And then we realized, where the birds are, it's this buffet for them, right? So it's pretty hard for them to fish. And if they survive all the herons and the water drains out, the ants come and eat them. We found some desiccated fish being munched on by ants. On the other side of the road, the water was draining from the flood meadow through a pipe into a deeper ditch, and we had juvenile piranha, Cerassalmsgeri, we had some silver dollars, Mylosoma, and again, loads of characins, Siphocarex boyadero, some other little fish. And then back on the other side, we had the flood meadow. So you can see the current that's flowing through this meadow is quite considerable. And maybe a week or so ago, this was just cattle grazing in the grass. The water was about half a foot to 2 feet deep. The visibility wasn't great, it was 2 to 3 feet. And every time I moved, I kicked up sediment. But you can see the flow here is really strong. You can see the tetras fighting against the flow, me trying to hold myself in place. And this is just like, imagine a football field suddenly getting covered in water. Probably the water was receding at this point back to the main river. That's why it's draining so fast. Dominated by lots of small characins. We've got those Astyanax again. And here we can see them drift picking. So it's when they sit in the current, and then they zip out to grab at something that's floating by and then back into position. I started moving through an area where there was a wallow, so where the cattle, when it's dry, they come and roll around. That creates this open area in the grasses. So I was having a look there to see what I could see. And see all those submerged grasses. Doesn't seem like there's a lot going on, just little tetras. So I was exploring a bit further, and we can see a pike cichlid here. Kind of skittish, doesn't like me, goes away. And then all these tetras come zooming out of here. Sorry, the visibility is not great. All these small fish come out of here, and they're being pursued by a young peacock bass, Cichla, this guy here. So just in this meadow, there's already 2 predators, Piscean predators, that the small fishes have to worry about. The only aquatic plant, apart from some nymphea, that I saw there was, I think, some kind of bacopa. Could be Bacopa saltzmani, it does occur in this region. But if you let the meadow, well, if you waited a few more weeks and the meadow roots remained flooded, you'd get other Sagittarias, other nymphaeas, maybe cabombas would emerge. Different fishes, we saw that cichla, the Crenicichla, members of Hemigrammus, Monkhausia, Mylosoma, juvenile piranhas, and earth eaters were found. But again, because the visibility was quite tricky, it was really hard to identify anything. But you can see lots and lots of tetras moving through there. And then I had a really nice moment when I saw something kind of moving around. I was like, what's that? And I got closer and it sort of disappeared, and I came back, and it was Cupid cichlid. So I stayed very still, and he came out to forage, and then started foraging under me, which was quite cute, but very skittish. You can see him over here. These are in the aquarium tray, the Cupid cichlids, and they are really characterful. They don't grow too big, Biotoderma cupidae, and they are lovely, and a lot of people have a lot of time for them, so it's a fish I'd recommend having a look at keeping. And whilst I was there, I was still a bit like, oh, I haven't seen any Ember tetras, and then past my head, a whole bunch of Ember tetras through the meadow. And I'm kind of pursuing them with one hand, clawing myself along the substrate, and the other hand trying to hold the camera. That gets old pretty quickly. So I only followed them for a little bit, but that was still pretty cool to see them in this environment. Let me just see how they move through those grasses. And then we were heading back, and I just wanted to show you here, this illustrates again how the fishes can move across the landscape taken by the little streams.
So it shows you that because we saw the egrets standing up here, we thought, all right, if the egrets are there, then there's probably prey. So we stopped the car, we looked, and down there, in that little stream, is a shoal of Ember tetras. So you often, when you're in the field, you look for stuff, but the way to find things is to let nature indicate, point out things like, look where the predators are, and you might find the prey items.
So the fish are being washed from one side of the road along these rivulets to the other, and then the rivulet along the edge of the road flows down a bank and into the next flood meadow. So the fish can sort of leapfrog across the landscape. And again, you've got to remember this, 40 years ago, this was forest. They would have been moving across leaf litter through past submerged trees. Now it's all grassland. Last two videos here.
There's a big shoal of Ember tetras in this flooded margin again.
This is just on the road. Lots of tetras are swimming in here.
Some bigger fish in here as well.
And let me go underwater for a second. So you can see it's just submerged grasses, and then little embers start appearing, zipping past the camera. I don't know if you guys can see that, but and they're just hoping to be washed down into the meadow next to the road. This gives you another idea of how these fish can survive in even just an inch or so of water. And this is just, the road is just flooded, and they are using the water to cross the road from one side of the meadows into the other. And I just think that's pretty incredible. You know, these tiny little animals in this huge landscape have found ways, even with all the barriers that human beings put in there, to survive and to utilize those habitats and utilize the resources that are there. I think that just shows how awesome nature is. I hope I've managed to convey a bit of that in this presentation. And just to finish then, it's better to have these adventures with friends. I was very lucky that I had Dr. Fernando Carvalho, who was my old supervisor from when I did my master's, and Dr. Fabrício Teresa, who's from the Federal University of Goiás. And he's from a project called Araguaia Vivo. You can find those guys on Instagram. It's in Portuguese, but it's a research and conservation program to study all the different plants and animals of the Araguaia River. They have like a research boat, and they spend weeks on it going up and down, collecting stuff. So this trip was kind of possible because of them, because we got the truck from the university and fuel and accommodation and all the rest. And again, you get to share these experiences with people who are passionate about nature, interested in science, absolutely fanatical about fish. It's kind of like the room here, which is where I want to be. And on that note, I just want to say thank you all for having me here again. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for looking after me. Thank you for coming and listening today. And it just thrills me to see so many people who are keen to come and listen to anyone talk anything about fish. And that's, yeah, thank you very much for being here. I hope that was sort of within the time limit.
Any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions? Not you, you always ask questions. No, go on.
Will you tell us about this beautiful Ember Tetra aquascape that you've created?
Yeah, so this is Ember Tetra biotope on the fly. We had to work with the plants that we had, but the idea was, I was thinking a little bit about that flooded pool where we were earlier, and I've created like a sort of islandscape with some plants that kind of look like the plants that you find in those habitats. So the plants that are back here, they're going to fill up, create this lovely, dense, tall stand of vegetation in the middle. And we chose a slightly deeper tank so you could basically put more Ember Tetras in there. And they'll be moving, feeling more confident because there's all this vegetation. There's areas to hide around the wood. We've got the leaf litter in there to try and make it look more sort of authentically biotope correct and organic. And this is an example of a biotope where you can't get the exact plant. And honestly, who cares? If the fish are happy and the plants are thriving and it looks natural and it looks authentic, no one should be online going, you've got the wrong kind of plant, it's not the plant from the river, it doesn't quite look right, you should fail and feel like you're a disgrace and go home with your tail between your legs. There's lots of that on the internet. Do what you want. As long as the fish and plants are happy, as long as their welfare is looked after, it's your creation, it's your hobby, it's your passion, do it. Does anyone have any questions about this? Melanie.
So in nature, in the biotopes, when you are doing your research, what is the current actually like in those settings? So, typically when I try to create a biotope, I think it needs to be very still, but like seeing the footage, it looks like there's actually quite a bit of current.
That's a great question, and you would be surprised at how much current these small fishes can tolerate. So in the grass meadow at the end, I've got my hand in the substrate, trying not to be swept away. And in those temporary pool where all the plants were, you can see the plants swaying. I've got my toes dug in, so I'm not being pushed back by the current. And then these tiny little Ember Tetras are just cruising past me like it's no deal. The fact is, they can leave areas of high current. So they can swim in it for a while, but if they were in it constantly, they'd be exhausted. So in a biotope, you can have strong flow, but you have to make sure, you can do that maybe with hardscape or planting, that there's areas where they can go and they can hang out, they can relax. It's like us, we can run pretty fast, but if we had to run 24/7, we wouldn't last very long. But they will astound you with the strength of current that they can swim against, and they seem to kind of enjoy it. It's nice. Are there any other questions? Yes. I'm going to come and...
Who is the fish named for?
Hyphysibrechinamande, I believe named for the mother of Heiko Blair, who, I'm going to say it, discovered them. I'm sure, along with many other species he discovered, they were already known, but it's actually one of my favorite stories, and thank you for raising it. I always tell people, when I used to work in the aquarium trade and they were looking for small little nano fish, I'd say, these fish are so cool, they're so beautiful, and the guy named them after his mother, and I think that's really sweet, and it adds an extra sort of layer of charm to them. So, great question, thank you. Are there any other questions? Micah, come on, you look like you've got questions.
Of all the Ember Tetras in that picture, which one was your favorite?
I gotta say, it's the one that swam past my mask about now. Yeah, one of those guys. I mean, we love them all equally,
I
right?
have a real question.
Yes.
So you see a lot of reeds there, and I'm guessing it's some Phragmites australis, the same, which is
Yeah.
probably not naturally from.
Yeah.
I mean, but did you notice any other, so when you're talking to people that like to do immersed plants,
Yeah.
like us, we're always looking for a species of maybe a reed or something shorter,
Yeah.
smaller, not quite. Did you see anything there, find anything there like that?
I mean, because I'm not a botanist, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
There were different kinds of sedges and persicarias.
Yeah.
So if you were looking for something that would mimic a biotope that's growing up and out of the water, different polygonums, persicarias, even some of your native persicarias,
Yeah.
you could use that. In the UK, we've got some different persicaria species that are sold as pond plants. They look exactly like what grows in the habitat. Some of the different Cyperus species can survive being in a foot or two of water, so you can use those.
the dwarf cypress. I have trouble getting hold of good specimens of anything but Cypress alternifolius.
Yeah,
Which of course is the one, you know, and it's great if you want to do a certain kind of biotope.
yeah. I mean,
Doesn't pay for a while, and then it kind of
Yeah,
peaks out after a while.
it gets weak
Yeah.
indoors.
okay, that may also be a lighting issue.
No.
No?
No, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's hard because, you know, it gets so tall
Yeah.
that you're then forced to position
Yeah.
another light above the crown.
The one that you can do, which I've used, where I've had sort of a maybe half-filled tank, I've used Eleocharis montevidensis, which is the quite sort of rigid hair grass.
Yeah, okay.
And if you pack that in, it can really look very, very effective. And sometimes it sulks a bit, but if you give it really good nutrients in the substrate, and it's sort of partially immersed, because when you buy it, it's been grown in greenhouses, right? So it's quite big. You put it in water, and a lot of it dies back.
I never get it. I never see it grown, greenhouse grown. I always see it aquatic grown.
Okay.
It's very, it's very,
The
it's
giant
very
hair grass,
floppy.
but yeah.
Okay.
Getting it to come up, getting it to,
It's a challenge.
it's a challenge. But yeah, I mean, it'd be awesome if we got them in pots. Is that?
In the UK, we buy it in pots, grown immersed.
Yeah, for like ponds?
No, for aquarium, Tropica sells it.
Okay.
And there's two varieties. There's the Tropica version.
Yeah.
At the
Seen that
shows,
too
have
often.
you said at the shows?
There's the Tropica version, which is sort of rigid stem, and then there's the ADA version, which is like Eleocharis vivipara. It's much softer and it bends in the flow. But yeah, the Tropica version looks effective.
Use some of the spike rushes that here, you know, blunt spike rush and stuff like that. They're very,
Yeah, they get so nasty.
they get so nasty.
I mean, biotopes.
Yeah.
So, are there any other questions? Because I've had quite a lot of your time. And I believe there's an auction or something happening. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Some people may have come here for that. I believe most people came here for the talk, right? But
Disco after the
a disco.
Yeah.
You're DJing.
Yeah.
Okay. God help us all. All right. Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.